I'm Andy Dorantes from Mexico, and I actually started climbing less than 3 years ago. I grew up in a city, I didn't have access to the outdoors, and I actually grew up playing soccer. And my big dream was to go to the US and get a scholarship to play soccer over there. And when I finished high school, I moved to the US. I played collegiate soccer for 2 years. And then one day I woke up and I wasn't enjoying soccer anymore. So I was like, oh shit, like I grew up loving the sport. And then all of a sudden I wasn't not enjoying it anymore. So I was like, okay, what am I going to do next? And from there, it opened up a world for me that it was amazing. I went to Canada, I worked as a raft guide. Then I started traveling all over the world. Then in the winter, I would be a ski instructor. So I was doing all these things that I really, really enjoyed. And then COVID hit.
Mysterious pneumonia outbreak in Wuhan, China.
A new type of coronavirus.
The number of affected countries has tripled.
The World Health Organization has just declared that this is a pandemic.
So do you remember that time that you could not buy toilet paper and all that stuff? I had to go back to Mexico because I could not travel anymore. So when I was in Mexico, I was like, oh shit, what am I going to do now? Like, I haven't been home for so long. I thought there was nothing to do in Mexico, that's what I thought at that moment. And then I realized that Mexico had big mountains. I didn't know that, honestly. I didn't pay attention when I was in 6th grade about geography. But I realized that Mexico has some big mountains. And then I met some friends and they were like, you want to climb Pico de Orizaba? Pico de Orizaba is the third highest mountain in North America. So it's actually a pretty big mountain. And I was like, yeah, sure, I love the adventure. Like, I had no idea what to expect, what it was going to be like. I didn't know how to use crampons or an ice axe, anything. But I was like, yeah, I love adventure, so I'll just go. And I remember that we started like at midnight climbing, and I could see the stars. And I felt something in my body that I've never felt before. I was like, shit, what is this? I'm really enjoying this. And then we got to the summit, and I saw like one of the most amazing sunrises I've ever seen. So like everything was just perfect, and I was like, oh my god, if I have this view in the highest point in Mexico, I cannot imagine what it's like to be in the highest point in the world. So I was like, since I started climbing my first mountain, I was like, oh, I want more and more. I love traveling and I love climbing mountains, so I want to combine this and I want to climb the highest mountain in every continent. And that's how it started. Because I didn't know, I had no idea how I was going to do it. I had no idea how much it was going to cost. I had no idea who was going to sponsor me, but everything just like boom, boom, boom. And I said, I'm going to do it in less than 2 years. And I just finished. When I decided to do this is when I took my first bars class ever. So I really think that everything took part because, I had new tools I could use. To be honest, after taking my first class, I didn't understand anything. Like, I knew that something changed and I could feel it in my body. I knew there was like a different world out there, but I could not understand anything. But I think, maybe I got rid of some limitations that made me question, like, how can I do this? Or like, what's the next step? Or like opening up my receiving. When I went to Ecuador the first time, I asked for sponsorship and they would give me, $100, $200. they gave me $500, and I was like, shit, this is amazing. Like, wow, they're giving me money to go climb. And then when I realized like how much it was gonna cost to climb these 7 mountains, it was like, shit, that's a lot of money. But I didn't use money as a limitation. Instead, I started asking for more money. And I went to the first company that I talked to. They gave me $100,000. So it was just like, oh, so everything just blew up. And that's when I really understood what Gary says about like the purpose of money is to change people's realities. And like I was like, okay, if I can receive more, I can open up myself to receive way more. So it was a big jump, from $100 to 100,000. So it's like, what? So I just, yeah, it's been a fun ride for sure. I feel like what really helped me with this project is that I could create my own reality, because I had no reference points. I didn't know anyone that had done it. I didn't know how to ask for sponsorships. So it was really questioning myself, like, what's gonna work, what's required for this to happen. And when I went out there to ask for sponsorship, like, I just had to be me, because I didn't have any experience. Like, I had climbed 4 mountains. That's it. Like 1 in Mexico, 3 in Ecuador. And now I'm telling you, give me $100,000 or give me a lot of money so I can go out there and climb mountains. Like, it doesn't make any sense in this reality. But it was more about like, if that's what's required, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to give it a shot. And to be honest, it blew my mind. Like, the first person that I asked, they sponsor 100% of my expeditions. So it was like, so everything has been like out of this reality. So I started with Kilimanjaro in Africa, and then I went to Aconcagua in Argentina. Then I did Denali in Alaska. The fourth one was Kosciuszko in Australia. Then I did Vinson in Antarctica, so that was pretty cool. And then I did Everest. And the last one I did was Elbrus in Russia. To be honest, for me, it's so cool because, I started climbing the small mountains, and then bigger, and then harder and stuff like that. But in the same time, I was taking like bigger access classes. So I started out with bars, so I climbed Kilimanjaro. So when I needed something else, I took foundation, and then I was going to do something else, and I took choice of possibilities, before choice for possibility. So for me, it was like, of course I had to train physically, but it was more important, and I would give priority to running myself bars or doing body processes, taking access classes, because at the end of the day, if your mind is not right, you cannot climb mountains. Like, you need everything to align to make it happen, and there's so many things out there that you cannot control. When you climb Everest, it's many days, like it took me 45 days to summit. But in the last push, when I was doing the last part from Camp 4 to the summit, I started climbing at night. And of course, like, there's no oxygen up there. So Gary told me to run some processes so that my body could adapt to that altitude. And that really helped, because there was a storm the day before I went up, and some people stole some oxygen bottles. So I didn't have the amount of oxygen bottles that I would need to make it to the summit. So I was like, I'm gonna risk it. I know my body can adapt to this, so I'm just gonna go with half the amount of oxygen that I'll need. But And honestly, like since I've never used oxygen before, I had no reference point. So I was like, okay, body, this is what we have. We're gonna do it. So I started climbing with my Sherpa at night. We started like at 9 p.m. at night, and I was just like a zombie, like autopilot, just putting a foot in front of the other, just going, going, going. You lose track of time, you lose track of distance. You don't have a reference point of anything. And then out of a sudden, it was like 5 a.m., so the sun started to come out. And I look to my left and I see like one of the most amazing views in my life. Like it was unbelievable. Can you imagine like being up there and seeing that view? It was like, wow. And then I look to my right and I just see black, like, well, gray. There was a huge storm coming towards us. I was like, shit, if this storm hits us, like, we can lose our lives like this, like it's not a joke to be up there with that storm. And it was like super windy, really cold, like everything was like, and I was just, for the first time I thought, shit, we might not make it to the summit. Like I was maybe like an hour from the real summit. And as I was thinking that, I see one of my teammates from the US and I see him coming back and I'm like, did you make it to the summit? And he's like, no, the storm is impossible today. And instead of being in drama and like, no, this is not gonna happen, the first thing that came to my mind, it was like, everything is the opposite of what it appears to be. Everything is the opposite of what it appears to be. Like, can you imagine? I'm at 8,800 meters. I have no oxygen. I cannot think. And that comes to my mind. And I just started repeating that phrase all over, until I made it to the summit. Like, I was just like, everything is the opposite of what it appears to be. Nothing is the opposite of what it appears to be. I was just saying that constantly. And I don't even know how I was speaking, because I was saying that out loud. And, like, you have the oxygen mask, you don't think, and I was like, shit, these things really work. Like, I never thought I was going to use those tools at that altitude in those conditions. And it was incredible when I made it to the summit, because I was the only one there. Like, that's really crazy, because I don't know if you've seen that Everest now is really, really crowded. So for me, it was like, wow, like we can really create a reality beyond this reality, because everything that has happened to me in those expeditions, in all my expeditions, has been just like, wow, you know? Well, I think every expedition I've used like different tools, but the one that I can think of is, for example, in Antarctica, that it's like super cold, like crazy. You cannot show any skin because you'll get frostbites, like this. So, like if your feet are cold, it's not comfortable at all. Or when I'm in expeditions, I really go back to ask to ask my body what it requires each day. So, like putting my socks on is always like, what combination of socks do you want today? And my body tells me, okay, put this and this. So I'm always comfortable. It's like, what do you want to eat today? And I give my body exactly what it needs. Of course, I don't have like many options. It's just dehydrated food, right? Or like, how do you want to hydrate today? So like, what do you want to put on? Or what should we do? Like, I don't know. I feel like when you're on expeditions, it's way easier to talk to my body and really give it what it needs to perform at the highest level. Or also, like, many people ask me, like, are you afraid, or like sometimes are you scared? Because for example, in Everest you have to cross crevasses in big ladders, and some people freak out. Or in Denali you have to go on this huge, I don't know what it's called in English, uh, when there's like a thin area in the mountain that that you can slide either this way or this way. So I always go back to being present and asking like, what energy is required right now. I've never been like really scared of dying, or like, oh, I'm gonna die or something's gonna happen. It's just like when I feel like maybe some fear is coming into my world, it's just going back to present, being present, because I've realized if you're present, fear is not there. Maybe when I was in Norway, I was doing a solo expedition, up north. and it's really cold. There's no one out there. I was just by myself pulling a sled, and I had a map and I had a compass, and that was it, and a GPS. And I marked I marked waypoints, and at the end, I marked on the map like where they were gonna pick me up. And I got to that point, and I was still in the middle of nowhere. I was like, shit, I don't have a map anymore. The GPS doesn't work because I'm in the middle of nowhere. And I was like, shit, where am I gonna go? So it was more like following like my what my body was telling me. And I took my first bars class. I didn't understand anything. And then I took my second one, and I was like, shit, whoa, what is this? I really loved it. And the only thing that I wrote on my manual that day was, our facilitator told us, like, your body is your compass. Like, if you ask your body, you'll always know. And the only thing that I wrote is like, my body is my compass. Like, why did I write that? I have no idea. But when I was in Norway, lost in the middle of nowhere, I started following my body, and then after a few hours, I made it to a tiny house, and then there was a couple there, so they kind of like rescued me. They gave me food, and they let me use their phone and stuff like that. So that was pretty cool. Like, going back and asking my body, like, show me the way. So that was pretty cool. To be honest, because I just came back from Russia, so it's been like 2 weeks, I think. But now it's like, what else? Like, what's next? What's next? So what I added to my project was to ski to the South Pole and North Pole. I did the South Pole already, so I'm looking forward to skiing to the North Pole. That's something. But now it's like, okay, I have all these cool stories. Like, now I think it's time for me to start sharing. So I think I'm on my way to become a CF. I think now it opens up a new possibility to show that, like, we all know that the tools work, because like, if you ask yourself, like, how much the tools have been a contribution in your life, or like anyone that has committed to using the tools, like, our lives have changed in a way that we cannot explain ourselves. So now I want to show, like, create your own reality, have fun, like, I'm honestly living the life of my dreams. So I want to share this, and if I can be an invitation for others to choose to live life in an amazing way, then I'm up for it.